African American, lived through some of the toughest times in American history. He embraced the color of his skin, fought for his rights as an American, and motivated Americans to fight for what they believe in. This man was not only an influential leader, but he was a role model to future presidential candidates in the United States of America. His name is Martin Luther King Jr. King was a humble man who grew up in a small southern town in Georgia. He followed in the footsteps of his father in delivering motivational speeches. He wanted to help Americans solve problems of the past, such as racial inequality between whites and blacks. African Americans during the time, even before his leadership, were treated as slaves. They were not given equal rights. Whites and blacks were treated differently in schools. For example, they were assigned to different water fountains, even seats in the school buses. And the important events that occurred during Martin Luther King's life were the several major civil rights protests during and after his lifetime. So not only during, but definitely after, there was several. In 1963, the civil rights protests had escalated significantly, and they led to the March on Washington. This march created a turning point which led to African American freedom, and it was a very, very significant point in history. Many Americans today are very thankful for this march. Not too long ago, after the march on Washington, Martin Luther King Jr.'s infamous "I Have a Dream" speech was presented to millions of Americans on August 28th, 1963, on national television. It was televised to people all over the world. His speech was a pivotal moment in the United States history, marking the end of racism. And that was very huge. Nobody could say that they were able to accomplish that, especially prior to Martin Luther King Jr. After that, his speech inspired millions to fight for their rights as Americans. And this speech also made a difference in the future generations. King states his vision in several of his speeches, such as the "I Have a Dream" speech, but it's also highlighted in "Ripples of Hope," the Great American Civil Rights speeches. As far as leadership styles, Martin Luther King Jr. was a transformational leader because he portrayed a vision. Transformational leadership is known to start with the development of a vision, a view of the future that will excite and convert potential followers. This vision may develop by the leader or emerge from a broad series of discussions. King became known as a leader that got people to work together rather than fight against each other. When he attended private meetings, he would stay quiet and listen to most of the conversations, just observing what people said. His personal philosophy portrayed the connection between the individual's relationship to God and his commitment to social activism on earth. I think that's definitely a great fact to know about Martin Luther King Jr. because that formed his theories and values, and it really, really pushed motivation. Let's see. American politicians began exploring how liberal his ideas were as a motivational speaker, mainly due to his desires to move people to challenge economic inequality. He started to notice inequality between whites and blacks all over the country, and it really moved him to and inspired him to be a leader. I believe the best way to honor his legacy is to truly understand the realities that he fought for which was inequality. The infamous "I Have a Dream" speech showed the world what kind of leader Martin Luther King Jr. was. He was a man of confidence, and that did get him very far, and even led presidential candidates to follow in his footsteps. A pivotal moment in history was the day of April 4th, 1968. It was a solemn day in American history due to the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. He was assassinated by a gunman as he stood on the balcony of Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. His death did not stop Americans from fighting for their rights and racial inequality. They just created memories of his life and what he stood for, his beliefs, and it was used as inspiration for future generations such as us today. The important events that occurred during his life were, as I mentioned, and the important events that occurred after his life are also very, very significant. I'll just list a few. In 2007, which is most current, there were a series of protests in Jena, Louisiana, where thousands of protesters gathered from across the country demanding freedom for a prisoner who they say was being treated unfairly because of his race. There are several cases of racial discrimination in the workplace as well that pertains to us currently today. It is sad to still see racism occurring, and I don't believe that there necessarily will be an end, but there will continue to be consequences. And I think the leaders in the future should definitely focus on, sticking to the rights of Americans, which is racial freedom. These protests that did occur in 2007 paralleled the civil rights protests that changed American society about 4 decades ago when Martin Luther King Jr. was still alive. And finally, the lessons that my leader taught me. Even though Martin Luther King Jr. is no longer with us, his motivational speeches, protests, and beliefs have led not only myself, but other leaders and presidential candidates such as John F. Kennedy, President Clinton, and even President Obama to continue to lead the United States of America to be a country of equality. Martin Luther King Jr. has taught me personally to fight for what I believe in, no matter what other people think. If he was able to make a difference during and after his lifetime, why shouldn't we be able to as American citizens of the United States of America? I believe that the color of your skin should not dictate what you bring to the table and who you are. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my speech, and God bless America. Thank you.